Singapore started obviously early. I think it was in the budget 2008, Singapore introduced the family-owned investment holding company, which is very similar to what Hong Kong has now introduced, the family-owned investment holding vehicle, they call it. But obviously Singapore started in 2008, and that's some 15 years ago. I remember I was invited to Tsinghua University to give a talk on wealth management, and nobody in China had heard about family offices in those days. Today, every wealthy family in China wants a family office. And where do they want to go to? I think, without upsetting too many people, I think they all want to go to Singapore. And that's the reason why there's a huge waiting list, huge queue in Singapore, 18 months. So, and that's testament to the success of what the government in Singapore has been doing. You know. And of course, Hong Kong has now come up with their new tax regime since April this year. The difference between Singapore and Hong Kong is there's no need for approval here to get started. Singapore, you need MAS approval. Here, you can get started straight away. So you obviate the waiting time, the queue. So we have told people, you know, even if you want to eventually come to Singapore, start here first. There's no reason why they cannot be here permanently as well, and they can even have both jurisdictions. If they get big enough, they can have both jurisdictions, and each jurisdiction have their own advantages. You know, Hong Kong, of course, has China. Singapore doesn't have China, but Singapore has the Southeast Asian. Well, if you ask the Taiwanese, they will say, no fear, I'm not going to go to Hong Kong. They would prefer to come to Singapore. You ask Indonesians, proximity, of course, they'll come to Singapore. And even some mainland Chinese families, they say, well, you know, coming to Hong Kong may be a bit too close for their liking. But there are those who are perfectly comfortable for mainland China setting up a family office in Hong Kong. Hong Kong is the perfect location, and that's Hong Kong's biggest advantage. So I wouldn't be surprised, you know, even if people were to domicile their family office in Singapore, I think most of the activities would probably be based in Hong Kong. The fund management industry is so much more vibrant here. Singapore has become so successful, they have imposed more requirements now. So you need to, for example, have local investments of 10% or 10 million, whichever is the lower. In Hong Kong, there is no such local investment criteria, mainly because I think the fund managers are doing so well anyway. Singapore and Hong Kong has always been competing to get the fund managers, and all this family office regime actually came about in the early days because Singapore was trying to attract the fund managers to come to Singapore. So the tax incentives were originally given to all the fund managers. And it was only much later on that they stumbled on this family office regime, and they've hit the jackpot this time. I think both Singapore and Hong Kong have the same qualities. We have great court system in Singapore, likewise Hong Kong. Notwithstanding what anyone says, you know, Hong Kong has an independent judiciary, likewise Singapore. And that's important for family offices. You know, you want to know that when things do go wrong, you can fall back on a robust legal system. And both Singapore and Hong Kong have, so there's not much differentiation in that respect. In terms of people, talent, I think there's more talent probably here than in Singapore. Both governments are now encouraging the education of their talent. It does come from abroad as well. And obviously, Hong Kong has the whole of China to go trawling in. You know, many families send their children out to be educated in the West. They all come back with degrees from Ivy Leagues, Oxford and Cambridge. And obviously in Hong Kong and China, they have a far bigger market. Well, again, you know, it's a question of how people are comfortable in a particular jurisdiction. Singapore is a very small place, has a population now approaching 6 million. Hong Kong is much bigger, and Hong Kong is, well, actually has more space, got the new territories, and theoretically you could even go and live in Shenzhen and come in by fast train. Singapore is not so accessible in that sense. Well, the whole idea of this, in Singapore they call it the sort of Part 4 tax exemptions. It's completely free of tax. Likewise, Hong Kong now is, you know, the family office is completely free of tax. So there's no comparison, you know, 0 to 0. In terms of regulations, there's probably slight differences. In Hong Kong now, to set up a family office, you need threshold investments, 240 million Hong Kong dollars, which is roughly about what, 40 million Sing dollars. About. In Singapore, we've got, well, the family office must have 240 million. AUM, yeah, AUM. In Singapore, they have the 13U now. The minimum investment is 50 million. But for local companies, you have the 13O, which is only 10 million. Although they give you a grace period in which you're supposed to bump it up to 20, but you can start off with a lower base. So you can theoretically start a family office in Singapore with 10 million AUM. So that's, but some people say, well, 10 million, that's not a real family office anyway. So, you know,